What is going on, YouTube? Today I would like to discuss the 8th story in my collection, The Crumbling of a Nation and Other Stories. That story is called A Baby is Born. There were a few different things that inspired me to write this story. The first is that my mother is constantly asking me when am I going to make her into a grandma, to which I always respond whenever I can actually afford to have a baby, because I am already struggling to keep myself alive. I have a mortgage, I have bills to pay, I have a wife that I have to take care of, I have 3 dogs, I have an addiction to buying books that I will probably never get around to reading, and adding a child to all of that does not seem financially feasible at the moment. And that is simply because the price of being alive in America today is astronomical. So that was inspiration number 1. The second piece of inspiration came from corporate control over our lives. You see, because life is so expensive, we cannot afford to be unemployed, meaning we are very much at the whim of our employers. But it's more than even just our salary. The average person in America would not have access to healthcare if it wasn't provided to them by their employer. And because of this, corporations have a lot of influence over our lives and the decisions that we make. Maybe you have this aspiration of one day opening a business, but because your life is already so expensive, you can't just go and quit your job and take a chance. So maybe it becomes a side hustle, or maybe it becomes something that you never actually pursue. Or maybe there's a job that you would really love to have, but it doesn't pay you nearly as much as the job you have now. And because you have a family that you need to take care of, you can't quit the job that you hate for the job that you love. Or maybe it comes down to where you live. Maybe you would really love to live in this city or this state or this country, but you simply do not have the financial means to make it possible. Or maybe it becomes a deciding factor on whether or not you are able to start a family. So that was piece number 2. The final piece of inspiration is the way that America has become a total oligarchy. We undoubtedly live in a nation where the wealthiest people and corporations have complete control over our politics. But it's not just the select few that want it to be this way, because we have actual voters saying that they want our country to be run like a business, which is absolutely insane, because a business's goal is not to make life better for its employees or its customers. Its one goal is to make as much money as it can for its shareholders. And in this case, the shareholders of America are not the citizen. It is the oligarchy. And so when we say we want to run our nation like a business, what we are saying is we want the customers, our citizens, to be entirely screwed over so that the shareholders, aka our oligarchs, are able to make a ton of money. And right now in America, we are reaping what we sow. But rant aside, those were the 3 major pieces that inspired this story, which details the day that Maybelline arrives at the hospital ready to give birth. But in this version of America, the only way a person is able to legally give birth is at a baby birthing hospital. And these baby birthing hospitals are run by corporations, where their only goal is to make as much money as humanly possible. And so now the price of giving birth is at a point that no average person can actually afford it. And so for Maybelline to be able to afford her bill at the end of her visit, and therefore be able to take her baby home, she must sign lifelong contracts on the behalf of her unborn child with various corporations, in exchange for those companies to pay the bill. And so when Maybelline arrives at the hospital, this is what it looks like. A bus plastered in ads pulled up in front of the hospital. 3 women emerged. The first was a few months pregnant. The second had a feeling she just might be. And the third was already very much in labor. It was this woman who was quickly swarmed by a group of men and women all yelling at once. On and on these recruiters screamed at Maybelline, trying desperately to get her to agree to a lifelong contract with their company on behalf of her unborn child in exchange for a hefty check before she could even enter the hospital, wherein they would then need to pay the hospital itself for access to her. They were relentless, standing between her and the door, doing everything they could to prevent her from going inside. Nor was this the first time they had harassed her. They had been soliciting her since the moment her pregnancy test came back positive and the results were sent from the baby birthing hospital to all of the companies in the area. And then, after the 2-week legally mandated waiting period, every other company in this great nation, which only intensified the soliciting, the harassment, the letters, the targeted commercials, the billboards in front of her apartment complex. They called her at all hours of the day and night. They came into her office in the middle of the workday and slipped her boss a 20 for the keys to her cubicle, which was only permitted to be unlocked during her 30-minute lunchtime and her pre-approved bathroom breaks. And when she locked herself in her apartment, the recruiter still came, her landlord's pocket getting fatter night after night. So unsurprisingly, by the time the bus dropped her off in front of the hospital, she was sick and tired of all the offers, all the recruiters, all the questions. And yet, they kept coming. Even as she reached the front desk, there were advertisements all around it, covering the wall and the desk itself, billboards and brochures, stickers and water bottles, business cards and flyers, all covered in slogans and promises and offers. Even the man behind the desk was covered in ads. The advertisements continued in her hospital room, where a nurse gave her a hospital gown to change into. It too was covered in advertisements. When the nurse left the room, Maybelline slid out of her bodysuit, which was covered in the many patches she had acquired throughout her life. Some given to her at birth, a few more provided whenever a corporation sponsored one of her childhood activities, and many more given to her whenever she took out a loan of any sort, and dressed in the gown provided. The doctor was not the first to enter the room. Instead, Maybelline had to entertain several visitors before she could even be permitted to see the doctor. In total, 28 recruiters entered the room. If you would like to hear the rest of this story or any stories like it, my book, The Crumbling of a Nation and Other Stories, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible, and the TikTok Shop. And if you would like to continue to hear about the inspirations behind each of these stories, make sure to hit subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.